The accident happened on a Tuesday. Evelyn Carter would remember that detail later, though she couldn't say why it mattered. Tuesdays were supposed to be unremarkable. Fence repair, livestock checks, the endless rhythm of ranch work that had defined her 43 years. But when the rotten beam in the barn loft gave way beneath her weight, when she felt that sickening moment of free fall before her body slammed into the frozen ground 12 feet below, Tuesday became the day everything broke. Not just her leg, though the fracture was bad enough that she'd heard the bone snap even through her own screaming. No, what broke was the illusion that she could handle anything alone. She'd crawled back to the house. Took her nearly 4 hours, dragging herself through snow that had seemed decorative that morning, but now felt like broken glass against her palms. The ranch dogs, Cisco and Bear, had followed alongside, whining, their warm bodies pressing against her when she had to stop and breathe through waves of pain so intense her vision went white. "I'm fine," she'd gasped at them, which was such obvious bullshit that even the dogs looked unconvinced. Just give me a minute." It took 17 minutes to crawl the last 20 yards to her porch. The house, when she finally collapsed inside, offered no comfort. The October wind had found every crack in the old structure, and her wood supply, which should have lasted until spring, sat in the barn she could no longer reach. She'd managed to splint her leg using a broken chair leg and torn bed sheets, biting down on a leather belt while she worked because there was no one to hear her scream anyway. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, in mid-November, Evelyn lay on the couch she'd barely left since the accident, staring at the ceiling beams she couldn't afford to replace and wondering which would kill her first. The cold, the hunger, or the infection she could feel brewing in her leg like a pot about to boil over. The phone had gone out in the first storm. The road to her property, never reliable, was buried under 4 feet of snow. Her nearest neighbor, Dutch Morrison, lived 9 miles south, and Dutch was 76 with a bad heart. Even if she could get word to him, what was he supposed to do? Die trying to reach her? "No," she said aloud, her voice cracking from disuse. The dogs lifted their heads from where they lay by the cold fireplace. "We handle our own problems," except she couldn't handle this. Not anymore. The pantry was empty. The last can of beans, dented, probably from the 1990s, had been scraped clean 2 days ago. She'd rationed everything, made her supplies stretch further than seemed possible, but mathematics didn't care about determination. 0 was still 0. This morning she'd tried to shoot a rabbit through the kitchen window. Her rifle had felt like it weighed 100 pounds, and her hand shook so badly the shot went wide by 3 feet. The rabbit had bounded away into the white landscape, completely unaware it had just witnessed Evelyn Carter's last real attempt at survival. She'd cried after that. Not from pain she could handle, but from the pure crushing weight of failure. The ranch had been her father's before it was hers. 300 acres of Wyoming frontier that had survived droughts, blizzards, the Depression, 2 wars, and her father's legendary stubbornness. When he died 7 years ago, everyone assumed she'd sell. A woman alone, no husband, no children. What was she going to do with a ranch? "I'm going to run it," she'd told them at the funeral reception, her jaw set in that particular way that made people stop arguing. Run it better than he did, and she had. For 7 years, she'd proved every doubter wrong, fixed what needed fixing, modernized what made sense, kept the traditions that mattered. She'd outlasted bad markets and harsh winters, rebuilt fences and birthed calves in the middle of April snowstorms. The Carter Ranch had thrived under her stewardship, not despite her gender, but because she was damn good at what she did. Now look at her. Helpless, useless, dying by inches in the house her grandfather had built with his bare hands. "Some legacy," she muttered. Cisco whined and patted over, resting his gray muzzle on the edge of the couch. She scratched behind his ears with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry, boy. I'm so sorry." The dogs hadn't eaten in 3 days either. She'd given them the last of her food, half a sleeve of stale crackers, and they'd refused to touch it until she'd ordered them to eat. Even then, Bear had looked at her with those liquid brown eyes that seemed to ask, "What about you?" "Dogs are too smart," her father used to say. "They see right through your bullshit." He'd been right about that, at least. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows in their frames. Another storm coming. She could feel it in her bones, or maybe that was just the fever. Hard to tell the difference anymore. She closed her eyes just for a moment, just to rest. When she opened them again, the light had changed. Hours had passed. The temperature in the house had dropped another 5 degrees, maybe more. Her breath formed thick clouds, and when she tried to sit up, her body refused the command. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, this is bad." Her leg throbbed with a heat that had nothing to do with warmth. When she touched the splint, the skin around it felt tight and hot. Infection spreading, claiming territory her immune system no longer had the resources to defend. She thought about her father's rifle, still leaning against the kitchen doorframe where she'd left it after the rabbit incident. One shot, quick, cleaner than freezing or starving. But even as the thought formed, she dismissed it. Carter women didn't quit. It was practically the family motto, right there next to "fix it yourself." And whiskey solves most problems that duct tape can't. "So what's the plan, Ev?" she asked the empty room. "Lie here until you freeze solid? Great strategy. The cattle." The thought hit her like a slap. The 27 head of cattle in the south pasture, they needed to be moved to the lower grazing area before the worst of winter hit. She'd meant to do it before the accident, but then, well, plans changed when bones broke. If she didn't move them, they'd get trapped in the high country when the heavy snows came. They'd starve up there, or freeze, or both. An entire herd, years of careful breeding and investment, gone because she'd been too stubborn to ask for help before it was too late. "No!" She forced herself upright, swallowing the scream that wanted to tear out of her throat. "No, I can do this. I can—" The room spun. She grabbed for the armrest, missed, and crashed to the floor in a tangle of blankets in pain so intense she actually blacked out for a few seconds. When awareness returned, she was lying face down on the old rug her grandmother had braided, tasting blood where she'd bitten her tongue. The dogs were going crazy, barking and pawing at her, and she wanted to tell them she was fine, but her mouth wouldn't form the words. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time had started doing strange things lately, stretching and compressing like taffy. Eventually, she managed to roll onto her back. The ceiling beams swam in and out of focus. She'd never noticed before, but there was a water stain up there shaped almost like a horse. Her father would have patched that, would have climbed right up there with a bucket of sealant and fixed it before the damage spread. But her father was dead, and she was dying, and the ranch that had survived so much was about to die with her because she'd been too proud to admit she couldn't do everything alone. The truth of it settled over her like the cold, heavy and inescapable. She was going to die here, in this house, on this floor, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. 200 miles northeast, in a ranch house 3 times the size of Evelyn's, Cole Bennett stood at his office window and watched sleet hammer against the glass. "You're not seriously considering this," his foreman Marcus said from the doorway. Cole didn't turn around. "The Morrison call came in 2 hours ago. She's been alone up there for 3 weeks. Dutch Morrison is half senile. For all we know, she's fine, and he's just confused about which neighbor he's worried about this week. He said she hasn't answered her phone since the first storm, said her road's impassable and he can't get up there to check. So call the county. Let them send someone. The county's stretched thin. Could be days before they get to her, if they even prioritize it. Woman living alone, property that remote. They'll assume she's got supplies and sense enough to stay put." Marcus sighed. "Cole, listen to yourself. You don't even know this woman, and you're talking about riding into a storm system that's supposed to dump another foot of snow starting tonight. It's suicide." Cole finally turned to face him. Marcus was 62, had worked the Bennett Ranch for 40 years, and had known Cole since he was in diapers. If anyone had earned the right to call him an idiot, it was Marcus. "I know what I'm doing." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're about to get yourself killed over a stranger. Again." The word hung in the air between them. Again. Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not what this is." "Isn't it? Because it sure as hell looks like it. Some woman you've never met is in trouble, and you're ready to risk everything to save her. Just like, don't." Cole's voice went flat. "Don't say his name." Marcus held up his hands. "Fine, I won't. But I'm also not going to stand here and watch you make the same mistake twice. Your brother made his choices. What happened to him? That wasn't your fault." "I know that." "Do you?" Because charging into a blizzard to rescue someone who probably doesn't even need rescuing feels a hell of a lot like you're trying to rewrite history. Cole grabbed his heavy coat from the back of his chair. I'm leaving in an hour. The roads are still passable if I go now. By morning, they won't be. You're taking the truck at least? Can't. Morrison said her access road is already drifted shut. Truck would get stuck in the first mile. I'm taking Ranger. A horse. You're going to ride a horse 200 miles through a blizzard to check on a woman who's probably fine. She's not fine. Morrison wouldn't have called if she was fine. Morrison called because he's a lonely old man who watches too much news and thinks every weather report is the apocalypse. Cole shrugged into his coat. Maybe, but if there's even a chance she's in trouble... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They both knew how it ended. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. You're just like your father. Stubborn as a goddamn mule and twice as stupid when you think someone needs saving. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't, but Marcus was already moving toward the door. I'll have the boys prep Ranger and load your saddlebags. You'll need the emergency supplies. Blankets, medical kit, food for 3 days minimum. And for Christ's sake, take the satellite phone. If you're going to get yourself killed, at least let us know where to find the body. The preparation took longer than Cole wanted. Ranger, a massive bay quarter horse with the temperament of a saint and the endurance of a machine, stood patient while they loaded him with gear. Food, water, medical supplies, a canvas tarp, rope, fire-starting kit, ammunition. By the time they finished, the horse looked like a pack mule, and the sleet had turned to snow. Last chance to reconsider, Marcus said. Cole swung into the saddle. At 46, he wasn't as young as he used to be, but ranch work kept him strong. He'd need that strength for what came next. Hold down the fort. I'll call when I get there. If you get there. When? Marcus stepped back, his expression caught between frustration and something that might have been fear. Your father would have done the same damn thing. Probably why he died at 50. Cole gathered the reins. My father died because his heart gave out. Nothing to do with stubbornness. Keep telling yourself that. The first hour wasn't bad. Cole knew this country. He'd ridden these trails since childhood, knew every creek crossing and shortcut. The snow fell steadily, but hadn't accumulated enough to slow them yet. Ranger moved with the steady, ground-eating gait of a horse who'd done hard miles before and wasn't impressed by weather. By the second hour, visibility started to drop. By the third, Cole began to wonder if Marcus had been right. The wind picked up, driving snow horizontal across the open rangeland. What had been a manageable ride turned into a fight against nature itself. The trail, such as it was, disappeared under a uniform blanket of white. Cole navigated by landmarks he could barely see, a lightning-struck pine, a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear, the fence line that marked the boundary between Bennett land and open range. His face went numb despite the scarf wrapped across his mouth and nose. Ice formed in Ranger's mane. The temperature dropped so fast Cole could feel it through his heavy coat, 20 degrees, then 10, headed for 0 and still falling. We're idiots, he told the horse. Marcus was right. We're going to die out here for someone we've never met. Ranger snorted, which Cole chose to interpret as disagreement. The thing was, Marcus had been half right. This wasn't just about Evelyn Carter, a stranger in trouble. It was about Daniel. His younger brother by 3 years, Daniel Bennett, had been everything Cole wasn't. Charismatic, reckless, convinced the world owed him adventure. At 22, he'd taken off for Alaska to work on a fishing boat, ignoring their father's warnings and Cole's attempts to talk sense into him. 3 months later, they got the call. Engine failure in a storm. Daniel and 2 other crew members had gone into the water. The others were found. Daniel wasn't. For weeks, Cole had torn himself apart with what-ifs. What if he'd tried harder to stop him? What if he'd gone along to watch his brother's back? What if? The rational part of his brain knew it wouldn't have mattered. Daniel had made his choice. But the other part, the part that woke him up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, that part whispered that he'd failed his brother when it mattered most. So yeah, when Dutch Morrison called about a woman alone in the mountains, injured and cut off by storms, Cole heard the echo of every failure he'd never been able to fix. And he'd gotten on his horse because this time, maybe, he could do something that mattered, even if it killed him. The storm intensified. What had been steady snowfall turned into a full blizzard, wind screaming across the open land with enough force to push Ranger sideways. Cole hunched in the saddle, trusting the horse to find footing he couldn't see. They crossed Bennett Creek, normally a gentle stream, now a frozen ribbon, and entered rougher country. Hills rose around them, channeling the wind into brutal gusts that cut through layers of clothing like they were tissue paper. Cole's hands, even in thick gloves, had gone past cold into a numbness that scared him. Frostbite. Hypothermia. The words cycled through his mind with clinical detachment. He'd seen both on the ranch, knew what they could do. If his core temperature dropped too far, he'd start making stupid decisions. Then he'd stop making decisions at all. Then he'd die, probably still in the saddle, frozen solid, while Ranger stood confused in the snow. Keep moving, he told himself. Words felt thick in his mouth, bad sign. Just keep moving. Hours blurred together. The world contracted to the patch of white in front of Ranger's nose, the burning cold in Cole's lungs, the mechanical motion of staying upright in the saddle. He pulled out the compass twice, no, 3 times, to check their heading. Northwest. Keep going northwest. At some point, night fell, though it was hard to tell the difference. The darkness was just another shade of gray in a world that had forgotten color existed. He should stop. Find shelter. Wait out the worst of the storm. Everything he knew about survival said to get out of the wind, conserve heat, stay put. But if he stopped, Evelyn Carter died. If she wasn't dead already. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, he felt a strange calm settle over him, the kind of clarity that came when all options narrowed to a single point. Forward was the only direction that mattered. Everything else was just noise. Ranger stumbled. Cole jerked alert. When had he started to doze? And realized they were climbing. The Morrison property was supposed to be in a valley, which meant they should be going down, not up. Whoa! He pulled on the reins, squinting into the darkness. Hold on, boy. The compass. Where was the compass? His fingers fumbled at his coat pocket, clumsy and slow. There. He flipped it open, angled it to catch what little light remained. East. They were headed east. Damn it! His voice sounded strange, slurred. How long had they been going the wrong direction? An hour? 2? He turned Ranger back toward what he hoped was northwest, but the landscape gave him nothing to work with. No landmarks, no trails, just endless white and a wind that wanted to scour them off the face of the earth. They descended into a draw that offered some shelter from the wind. Cole slid from the saddle, his legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. He needed to rest, just for a minute, just long enough to get his bearings and warm up enough to think straight. He rigged the canvas tarp between Ranger and a cluster of rocks, creating a pocket of relatively calm air. The horse stood patient while Cole's numb fingers worked the knots. Inside the makeshift shelter, out of the direct wind, the difference was immediate. Not warm. Nothing would be warm tonight. But survivable. Cole dug through the saddlebags for the emergency supplies. Blanket, thermos of coffee, probably frozen by now, jerky. He forced himself to eat even though his body didn't want food, just sleep. Sleep would kill him. He knew that like he knew his own name. Okay. He spoke to keep himself alert. Okay, we're off course. Storm's worse than expected. Smart thing to do is wait it out. Morning, we can see where we are, get back on track. Even as he said it, he knew it was bullshit. The storm wasn't going to break by morning. The forecast had been clear. 3 days of heavy snow, high winds, temperatures well below zero. This was just the beginning. And Evelyn Carter was running out of time, if she hadn't run out already. Cole closed his eyes. Just for a second, just to rest them, and immediately jerked them open. That's how it happened. That's how people died in the cold. They closed their eyes for just a second, and that second stretched into forever. He forced himself to his feet, stamping to get circulation moving. His toes had gone numb hours ago, probably frostbite in at least a few of them. He'd deal with that later, if there was a later. The wind howled outside their shelter, a sound like the earth itself screaming. Somewhere in that darkness, if he'd calculated right, Evelyn Carter was fighting her own battle. 2 people, strangers, both at the mercy of a winter that didn't give a damn about determination or pride or any of the things humans thought mattered. We're coming, he said, not sure if he was talking to her or to himself. Just hold on. We're coming. Ranger shifted, snow crusting on his back despite the tarp. The horse had done everything asked of him and more. Cole ran a hand along the animal's neck, feeling the solid warmth of muscle and life. Tomorrow, he promised. Tomorrow, we find her. If they made it to tomorrow, if she made it to tomorrow, if any of them made it, Cole pulled his coat tighter and settled against Ranger's bulk, stealing what warmth he could from the horse's body. The wind screamed, the snow fell, and somewhere in the vast darkness of the Wyoming winter, two lives hung in a balance that was tipping toward the wrong side. He thought about his brother, somewhere at the bottom of the Bering Sea. Thought about his father, dead of a heart attack 3 years ago while fixing fence in July heat. Thought about all the ways the world could kill you if you gave it half a chance. But he also thought about the woman he'd never met. Stubborn enough to run a ranch alone, tough enough to survive 3 weeks with a broken leg, proud enough to die rather than ask for help. Yeah, he muttered. I know the type. The storm hammered on. Cole forced himself to stay awake, counting seconds, then minutes, then hours. He recited poetry he'd learned in high school, listed every horse he'd ever owned, named all 50 states in alphabetical order. Anything to keep his brain active, keep his body from shutting down. Sometime in the darkest hours before dawn, the wind shifted. Cole felt the change more than heard it. A slight easing in the pressure, a break in the relentless assault. He pushed out of the shelter, every muscle screaming protest, and looked up. The clouds had thinned. Not much, just enough that he could see stars in a few patches of sky. That's something, he told Ranger. Not much, but something. He saddled up again, movements automatic from a lifetime of ranch work. His hands had regained some feeling, which meant they hurt like hell. Good. Pain meant he wasn't too far gone yet. They rode out of the draw as the first hint of gray touched the eastern horizon. The snow had eased to occasional flurries. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Cole's thermometer read -15, but at least they could see. The landscape that emerged from the darkness was alien and beautiful. Hills transformed into smooth white sculptures, trees bent under the weight of snow. The whole world holding its breath in the pause between storms. And there, maybe 5 miles northwest, a thin column of smoke rising into the dawn sky. No, not smoke. Cole's heart sank. It was too diffuse, too pale. Steam, maybe, or just his eyes playing tricks in the low light. But it was northwest, and it was something. Let's go, boy. Ranger moved into his ground-eating walk, and Cole let the horse pick the path. Fresh snow hid what lay beneath, rocks, holes, deadfall. But Ranger had good instincts. Better than Cole's, probably, at this point. The sun rose, turning the snow from gray to blinding white. Cole squinted against the glare, wishing he'd thought to pack snow goggles. Another mistake to add to the growing list. 3 miles. 2. The smoke, or whatever it was, had disappeared, but Cole held their course. His internal compass said they were close. His gut said they were almost there. And then Ranger stopped. Cole looked up from his fog of exhaustion and cold and saw it. A house. Small, weathered, smoke-dark against the white. No smoke from the chimney, no tracks in the snow around it. No signs of life at all. Please, he heard himself say, please let us not be too late. He dismounted, nearly fell, caught himself on the saddle horn, and stumbled toward the porch. His legs didn't want to work right. Frostbite for sure, maybe worse. He'd worry about that later. The door was unlocked. Stupid. That detail stuck with him. Who left their door unlocked in country like this? Someone who wasn't expecting visitors, or someone who'd stopped caring. Cole pushed inside and was hit by cold so intense it might as well have been heat. This wasn't outdoor cold. This was the cold of a place that had given up, where fire had died and life was following close behind. Hello? His voice cracked. Miss Carter? Evelyn? Nothing. He moved deeper into the house, eyes adjusting to the dim interior. Kitchen to his right, living room ahead. And there, on the floor between a couch and a cold fireplace, a body, too still, surrounded by dogs that looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowledge and no hope at all. Cole dropped to his knees beside her. Evelyn Carter, had to be, and reached for her throat with shaking hands. Please, please let there be a pulse. His fingers, clumsy with cold and fear, pressed against her neck. Nothing. He shifted his grip, tried again. There. Faint. So faint he almost missed it. But there. A heartbeat. Okay. He was talking again, words spilling out in a rush of relief and terror. Okay, you're alive. You're alive. And we're going to keep you that way. You hear me? We're going to keep you that way. He had no idea if she could hear him. Didn't matter. He needed to hear it himself. Cole's training kicked in. Years of ranch emergencies, injuries in remote locations, that weekend wilderness first aid course he'd taken but never thought he'd use. Check for breathing, check for bleeding, assess the injury. Her breathing was shallow, irregular, no obvious bleeding. But her leg, Christ, her leg was a mess. Splinted, but the skin around the splint was angry red, fading to a sickly purple gray. Infection. Bad infection. And she was cold. Not just cold. Hypothermic. Her core temperature had dropped to the point where her body was shutting down, conserving what little energy remained for the barest essentials of staying alive. Fire, he said to the dogs, who watched him with desperate intensity. I need to get her warm. The fireplace. He lurched to his feet, grabbed the poker, found kindling and larger wood stacked beside the hearth. His hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to light the match, but finally, flame caught and spread. While the fire built, Cole ran back outside for his saddlebags. The medical kit, blankets, anything he could use. Ranger stood where Cole had left him, snow already accumulating on his back. I'll get you inside soon, Cole promised. Just let me back in the house. The fire was going strong now, throwing heat and light into the frozen space. Cole stripped off his coat, wrapped Evelyn in every blanket he had, positioned her close to the fire, but not too close. Hypothermia treatment protocols ran through his head. Gradual rewarming, watch for cardiac arrest. Don't warm too fast or you'll cause more damage. Her pulse remained faint but steady. That was good. That was something. He found the kitchen, started water heating on a propane camp stove he'd brought. Warm liquids, if he could get her conscious enough to swallow. The satellite phone? Where was the phone? In his coat. He dug it out, punched in the emergency number. Nothing. He checked the display. No signal. Of course no signal. They were in a valley in the middle of a blizzard. Getting a signal out here would take a miracle, and Cole had already used up his miracle quota just finding her alive. Okay. He forced himself to breathe, to think. Okay, we do this the old-fashioned way. I keep her stable. I get her through the night. Tomorrow, when the weather clears, I get a signal and call for help. Simple plan. Probably doomed to fail. But it was all he had. Cole sat back against the couch, Evelyn's unconscious form between him and the fire, and let himself acknowledge just how screwed they both were. He was exhausted, possibly frostbitten, definitely hypothermic himself. She was critically injured, infected, hypothermic, and slipping away despite his best efforts. They were snowed in with limited supplies, no communication, and another storm due to hit in less than 24 hours. One of the dogs, the gray one, patted over and laid his head on Cole's knee. The other, a brindled mutt, curled against Evelyn's side like a living hot water bottle. Good dogs, Cole said, and meant it. You kept her alive this long. Now we finish the job. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up again, the next wave of the storm rolling in. Cole added more wood, checked Evelyn's pulse again, still there, thank God, and settled in for what promised to be the longest night of his life. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard Marcus's voice. You're going to get yourself killed over a stranger. Maybe. Probably. But at least this time he'd made it in time. This time someone would live, if he could just keep them both alive long enough to see morning. The fire had been going for 2 hours before Evelyn's eyelids flickered. Cole saw it from where he sat cross-legged on the floor, his back against the couch, watching her face for any sign of change. Just a twitch at first, so small he thought he'd imagined it. Then her fingers moved, curling slightly against the blanket. That's it, he said quietly. Come on back. Her eyes opened, not all the way, just slits of confusion staring up at the ceiling beams. Her lips moved, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Don't try to talk yet. Cole shifted closer, keeping his voice steady. You're safe. You're in your house. There's a fire going. You're going to be okay. Her gaze found him then, and even through the fog of hypothermia and fever, he saw the fear spike. Her hand fumbled toward something, a weapon probably, if she'd had the strength to reach one. Whoa. Easy. He held up both hands. My name's Cole Bennett. Dutch Morrison called me. Said you might need help. I'm not here to hurt you." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her mind working through the fog, trying to make sense of a stranger in her house, a fire in her fireplace, the fact that she was still breathing when she'd been pretty sure that was over. "Dutch!" Her voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. "Dutch is an idiot." Cole felt a laugh bubble up despite everything. "Yeah, I'm starting to think you might be right about that." "How?" She swallowed, wincing. "How did you get here?" "Horse. Took about 18 hours through the storm. Got a little lost around midnight, but rangers got better sense than I do." He reached for the water he'd been warming by the fire. "Can you drink?" She tried to sit up, made it about 3 inches before her body gave out. The frustration that flashed across her face was so raw it hurt to watch. "Let me help." Cole slid an arm behind her shoulders, supporting her weight. She was lighter than she should be. Weeks of starvation had carved away everything except bone and stubbornness. "Slow sips. Your stomach's not going to be happy about this." The water touched her lips and she drank like someone who'd crossed a desert. Cole had to pull the cup back before she made herself sick. "More," she gasped. "In a minute. Let that settle first." "Don't." She coughed, and the sound was wet and ugly. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house." "Wasn't planning to, just trying to keep you alive long enough to kick me out properly." Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for mockery. When she didn't find it, some of the tension bled out of her shoulders. "You're serious. You actually rode 200 miles in a blizzard because Dutch Morrison made a phone call. When you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid." "It is stupid," but her voice had lost some of its edge. "You could have died. So could you. Looks like we both got lucky." She glanced toward the fire, then back at him. The fever put spots of color high on her cheekbones, but the rest of her face was gray. "What time is it?" "Around 4 in the afternoon. You've been out for a while." "Days?" "Hours. I got here just after dawn." Evelyn closed her eyes, and Cole thought she might be fading again, but then she spoke. "My leg's infected." "I know. Bad infected. I can smell it." "I know that too. So what's your plan, cowboy? You got a medical degree in those saddlebags?" Cole met her eyes. "No. But I've got antibiotics, clean bandages, and enough stubbornness to match yours. We're going to change that dressing, get some food in you, and keep you warm until the storm breaks and I can get a signal out." "And then what?" "Then we get you to a hospital." She laughed, and it turned into another coughing fit that left her gasping. When she could breathe again, she shook her head. "Nearest hospital's 3 hours away on a good day. Roads won't be clear for a week, maybe more. You're talking about helicopters and rescue teams, and that costs money I don't have." "We'll figure it out." "No." The word came out flat. "I've been figuring things out my whole life without help. I'm not starting now." Cole sat back on his heels, studying her. Even half dead and delirious with fever, she had the same look he'd seen in the mirror most of his life. The set jaw of someone who'd rather break than bend. "You're not in a position to argue," he said finally. "Watch me." "Fine. Here's how this is going to go. I'm going to take care of that leg whether you like it or not, because if I don't, you'll be dead by morning. Then we're going to have a longer conversation about your definition of strength, but that can wait until you're not actively dying. Deal?" "I don't remember agreeing to—" "Deal," Cole repeated and stood up. "Now shut up and let me work." For a second he thought she might actually try to fight him, but whatever reserves of energy she'd scraped together to wake up were already gone. She slumped back against the cushions he'd propped behind her, breathing hard. "I hate you," she muttered. "You don't even know me." "I know your type, riding in like some hero, thinking you're going to fix everything." Cole paused in the act of digging through his medical kit. "Lady, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who happened to be available when you needed help." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, heroes are brave. I'm just too stubborn to know when to quit." That got a sound that might have been a laugh. "Okay, maybe I hate you a little less. I'll take it." The next hour tested both their limits. Cole had treated plenty of injuries over the years. Ranch work was dangerous, and the nearest vet was usually closer than the nearest doctor. But he'd never dealt with an infection this advanced. When he cut away the makeshift splint and bandages, the smell hit him like a wall. Evelyn turned her head away. jaw clenched. Told you it was bad. You weren't lying. Cole forced himself to breathe through his mouth and assess the damage. The break itself looked clean. She'd set it well, considering. But the infection had spread from where the bone had torn through skin, angry red streaks radiating up her calf toward her knee. If it reached her bloodstream, he didn't finish that thought. This is going to hurt, he said. Everything already hurts. It's going to hurt worse. She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw the fear behind the defiance. How much worse? A lot. I need to clean this out, get the antibiotics in you. The cleaning part, he trailed off. Just do it. Evelyn, do it before I lose my nerve. Cole nodded, reached for the bottle of whiskey he'd found in her kitchen. Drink this first. All of it. She took the bottle with shaking hands, drank until she coughed, drank some more. When she handed it back, her eyes were watering. Haven't had whiskey in 3 weeks, she said. Probably should have saved it for celebrating not being dead, but Cole poured the rest over her leg. The scream that tore out of her was probably heard in the next county. The dogs bolted upright, barking. Evelyn grabbed for Cole's arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and he let her. She needed something to hold on to, and if it was him, fine. I'm sorry, he said, working quickly while she was too shocked to fight. I'm sorry. I know. Almost done. He cleaned the wound with movements that were more efficient than gentle, applied the antibiotic ointment thick, wrapped fresh bandages around her calf, and reset the splint. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes, but from the way Evelyn was breathing, harsh, ragged gasps, it might as well have been hours. When he finally sat back, she was chalk white except for 2 spots of feverish color on her cheeks. Done, he said. Worst part's over. She didn't answer. Her eyes had rolled back, and for a terrifying second, Cole thought she'd gone into shock. But then her breathing evened out, and he realized she'd just passed out. Probably for the best. He covered her with the blankets again, added more wood to the fire, and finally let himself acknowledge how exhausted he was. When was the last time he'd slept? Yesterday morning, back at his ranch, in a bed that seemed like something from another lifetime. The dogs had settled down again, one on either side of Evelyn. The gray one, Cisco, based on the name carved into his collar, watched Cole with wary eyes. I'm not going to hurt her, Cole told the dog. We're on the same side here. Cisco didn't look convinced, but he didn't growl either. Progress. Cole moved to the window, looked out at a world that had disappeared into white. The storm had intensified while he'd been working, and visibility was down to maybe 20 feet. Ranger was out there somewhere. Cole had managed to get the horse into what passed for a barn, though the structure looked about as stable as Evelyn's health. He should check on the horse, make sure he had water, food, shelter from the worst of the wind. But the thought of going back out into that cold made every muscle in his body protest. 5 minutes, he muttered. 5 minutes, then I'll go. He sat down on the couch just to rest his eyes. When he woke, it was dark and someone was screaming. Cole jerked upright, disoriented, reaching for a weapon he didn't have. The fire had burned down to coals. The screaming resolved into Evelyn, thrashing against her blankets, caught in the grip of fever dreams. No, she gasped. No, I have to. The cattle, they'll die. Hey. Cole dropped to his knees beside her, caught her hands before she could tear at the bandages. Evelyn, you're dreaming. Wake up. Her eyes snapped open, but they weren't seeing him. She was somewhere else entirely, fighting battles he couldn't see. Dad said I couldn't do it, she said, her voice cracking. Said a woman can't run this place alone. But I did. I did it. 7 years and I proved him wrong. You did, Cole agreed, trying to anchor her to reality. You did prove him wrong. The ranch is still here. You're still here. The cattle. I have to move them. They're trapped in the high pasture and the snow. The cattle are fine. You don't know that. You don't. They'll starve. They'll freeze. And it'll be my fault because I wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough to stop. The word came out sharper than he intended. Cole gentled his tone. Listen to me. You did everything you could. What happened, the accident, the storm, none of that was your fault. She focused on him then, really seeing him for the first time since she'd woken. Who are you? Cole Bennett. We met earlier, remember? Cole? She tested the name like it was unfamiliar. You came through the storm. Yeah. Why? It was the same question Marcus had asked, and Cole still didn't have a good answer. Because Dutch Morrison called? Because his brother died and he couldn't save him? Because sometimes you had to do something that mattered, even if it was stupid? Does it matter? He asked instead. Evelyn studied his face in the dim light from the coals. I guess not. You're here, that's what counts. How are you feeling? Like I got trampled by a horse, set on fire, and left to freeze. So, better than yesterday. Cole found himself smiling despite everything. That's a hell of a baseline. I'm a hell of a woman, but her bravado crumbled almost immediately. I need to check the cattle. You need to stay put and heal. You don't understand. They're in the south pasture, and if the snow gets too deep, where's the south pasture? She blinked at him. What? The south pasture. Where is it? How do I get there? You can't. It's a 3-mile ride in good weather, and in this... Evelyn? He waited until she met his eyes. I rode 200 miles to get here. 3 more isn't going to kill me. Tell me where the cattle are, and I'll check on them. You'll freeze to death. Probably not. I'm too stubborn, remember? She laughed, and it sounded more genuine this time. You really are an idiot. So I've been told. Now are you going to give me directions, or am I going to wander around until I find them by accident? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Cole could see the war playing out behind her eyes, pride versus pragmatism, the deep-rooted need to handle things herself versus the reality that she physically couldn't. Finally, she sighed. Follow the fence line east from the barn. About 1.5 miles, you'll hit a gate. Through the gate, follow the creek bed north. The pastures at the base of the hills, you'll see the shelter I built last spring. Should be able to spot the herd from there if they're still grouped up. What am I looking for? Make sure they're alive. Make sure they have access to the shelter. Check the water tank. There's a heater that keeps it from freezing, but if it failed... She closed her eyes. Just make sure they're okay, please. The please cost her. Cole could hear it in her voice. I'll take care of it, he promised. But I need you to promise me something too. What? You stay here. Keep the fire going. Don't do anything stupid like try to follow me. I can't even stand up. That didn't seem to stop you from trying to crawl outside yesterday, based on the trail of blood I found. She had the grace to look embarrassed. That was different. I thought you had to do everything yourself, even if it killed you. I get it. I really do. But right now, the smartest thing you can do is stay alive. Can you manage that for a few hours? Don't condescend to me. Wasn't trying to, just stating facts. Evelyn glared at him, but there was no real heat in it. She was too tired, too sick, too worn down to maintain the anger. Fine, I'll stay here, but if those cattle are dead because you got lost in the snow, they won't be. I'll be back before you know it. He stood, started gathering his gear. The temperature had dropped even further. His thermometer read -20, and that wasn't accounting for wind chill. This was officially the stupidest thing he'd done in a week full of stupid decisions, but he'd made a promise. Cole fed the fire, left Evelyn with water and what passed for food, jerky and crackers from his supplies, and headed for the door. Cisco followed him, tail low. You want to come? Cole asked the dog. Cisco looked back at Evelyn, then at the door, clearly torn. Go ahead, Evelyn called from the couch. Someone needs to make sure he doesn't die out there. Might as well be you. The dog needed no further encouragement. He pushed past Cole into the night, and together they stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a physical blow. Cole's lungs seized, his eyes watered, and for a second he genuinely couldn't breathe. Then his body adjusted, or at least stopped trying to kill him, and he could move again. Ranger was where he'd left him, standing in the barn with his head low. The horse looked up when Cole entered, snow crusted on his eyelashes. I know, buddy, but we've got one more trip to make. The ride to the south pasture took 40 minutes that felt like 4 hours. Cole followed Evelyn's directions by feel more than sight, with Cisco ranging ahead like a furry scout. The fence line was buried under snow, but the post stood dark against the white, just visible enough to navigate by. The gate was frozen shut. Cole had to dismount and kick it 3 times before it budged. The creek bed was easier, a natural depression in the land that channeled them north. Ice had formed along the edges, but the center still ran with dark water that looked black in the dim light from Cole's headlamp. And then, at the base of the hills, he saw them. 27 head of cattle, huddled together in the shelter of a three-sided structure that was half buried in snow. They looked up at his approach, breath steaming, eyes reflecting the light. Cole let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Alive. They were alive. He dismounted, checked the water tank. The heater was still running, keeping a circle of liquid water in the center of the ice. The cattle had trampled a network of paths through the snow, accessing both water and the hay bales stored under the shelter's roof. They'd be okay. For now, at least. Until the next storm hit, until the hay ran out, until any of 1,000 things went wrong. But for now, they were okay. Your boss is one hell of a rancher, Cole told the nearest cow, a black Angus with a white blaze. Stubborn as hell, but she knows what she's doing. The cow chewed its cud and looked unimpressed. Cole took pictures with the satellite phone. Still no signal, but at least he could show Evelyn proof when he got back. Then he remounted Ranger and headed home. Home. Funny word for a stranger's house, but that's what it felt like when he pushed through the door an hour later, half frozen and exhausted, and saw Evelyn still awake by the fire. "Well?" she demanded before he could even get his coat off. "They're fine. All 27 accounted for. Water's good, hay's good, shelter's holding. You did good work out there." The relief that crossed her face was so profound it hurt to watch. "You're sure?" "Positive. Took pictures." He fumbled with the phone, showed her the screen. She stared at the images like they were precious artifacts, and maybe to her they were. "That's Bessie in front. She's the herd leader, always has been. If she's okay, the others will follow." She looked pretty content, all things considered. Evelyn handed the phone back, blinking hard. "Thank you. I know I haven't been. You don't need to thank me." "Yeah, I do. You could have left me here. Should have, probably. But you didn't, and then you went out in that storm again because I asked. So, thank you." Cole shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have called it good enough just to get me breathing again. But you... She paused, searching for words. "You understood what those cattle mean. Not just money, not just livestock. They're my life's work. 7 years of building something that matters. And you got that." "I run a ranch too," Cole said quietly. "I know what it means." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl outside. The storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. "How long do you think we're stuck here?" Evelyn asked. "Honestly, could be days. The forecast was bad and it's delivering on every promise." "Your people will worry." "Yeah, but Marcus knows I'm an idiot. He'll figure I'm holed up somewhere waiting it out." "What about your family?" Cole felt the familiar ache settle in his chest. "No family. Just the ranch hands. My father died 3 years ago. My brother, he's been gone longer than that." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. We all lose people." He met her eyes. "Your father, the one who didn't think you could run this place. When did he die?" 7 years ago. Heart attack while fixing fence." She smiled, but it was bitter. Worked himself to death trying to prove something to ghosts. Seemed fitting, in a way. "And you've been running the ranch alone ever since." "That's right. No help? No hired hands? Can't afford it. Had to sell off some acreage just to keep the lights on that first year. After that, I figured out how to do more with less. It worked. Until it didn't." Cole added more wood to the fire. "What happened? The accident? How'd it happen?" Evelyn was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, "Rotten beam in the barn loft. I knew it was bad. Knew I should have replaced it months ago. But I kept putting it off because money was tight and there was always something more urgent, so I worked around it, told myself I'd get to it eventually." She laughed without humor. "Eventually came faster than I expected." "That's not your fault." "Isn't it? I made the choice. I knew the risk." "You made the choice everyone makes when resources are limited. You prioritized. Sometimes those choices work out, sometimes they don't." This one almost killed me. "But it didn't. You're still here. Because you showed up. Because you're too stubborn to die. I just helped a little." Evelyn shifted against her makeshift pillow, wincing as the movement jarred her leg. "Why did you really come, Cole? And don't give me that line about Dutch Morrison calling. There's more to it than that." Cole considered deflecting, but something about the way she asked, direct, honest, expecting the same in return, made him tell the truth. "My brother," he said. "Daniel. He died 8 years ago. Fishing boat went down in a storm off Alaska. They recovered 2 of the crew. He wasn't one of them. I'm sorry. He was 22. Thought he was invincible. I tried to talk him out of going, but Cole shrugged. He didn't listen. And I let him go anyway, because I figured he was an adult and could make his own choices. That wasn't your fault either. Wasn't it? I knew he wasn't ready, knew the job was dangerous, but I didn't push hard enough, didn't... Stop. Evelyn's voice cut through his spiral. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Trust me. I know. Cole met her eyes. Yeah, I'm getting that impression. So when Dutch called about a stranger in trouble, you saw a chance to rewrite history. Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't stand the thought of someone dying alone when I could have done something about it. Even if it killed you in the process? Even then. They looked at each other across the firelight. 2 people who'd spent too long carrying weight that wasn't entirely theirs to carry. We're quite a pair, Evelyn said finally. Both too stubborn for our own good. Seems that way. You think we'll make it out of this? Cole glanced toward the window where snow piled against the glass like something alive and hungry. Yeah, I do, but it's going to take both of us working together. You good with that? Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside something had shifted. A wall coming down, a bridge being built. It wasn't trust yet, not exactly, but it was the beginning of something that might become trust, given time, and time, for now, was all they had. The fever broke on the 3rd day, but not cleanly. Cole woke to find Evelyn convulsing beside the fire, her body rigid with seizures that made the dogs howl in panic. He rolled her onto her side, held her there while her muscles spasmed and her teeth chattered hard enough to crack. It lasted maybe 90 seconds, felt like an hour, and when it finally stopped, she lay gasping like a fish on dry land. I'm okay, she wheezed before he could ask. Just give me a minute. That wasn't okay, that was a seizure. I know what it was. She tried to sit up, failed, let him help her back against the cushions. Happened once before, years ago. High fever. Body just shorts out sometimes. You need a hospital. What I need is for this infection to clear. She touched her leg gingerly, hissed at the contact. Is it getting worse? Cole had changed the dressing twice daily since he'd arrived, and the honest answer was that he didn't know. The angry red streaks hadn't spread further up her calf, but they hadn't receded either. The wound itself looked marginally better, less pus, less smell, but that might have been wishful thinking. Hard to say, he admitted. The antibiotics are doing something, but whether it's enough... In other words, we're hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Pretty much. Evelyn laughed and it turned into a cough. Story of my life. The storm had finally broken that morning after 3 solid days of snow. Cole had stepped outside at dawn to a world transformed. Drifts 8 feet high against the north wall of the house, the barn barely visible under its white burden, trees bent double under the weight. Beautiful and deadly in equal measure. And still no cell signal. He'd climbed to the highest point he could reach, held the satellite phone above his head like some kind of technological prayer, and gotten nothing but static. We're on our own, he'd told Evelyn when he came back inside. She'd just nodded, like she'd expected nothing else. Now, watching her breathe through the aftermath of the seizure, Cole felt the weight of that isolation press down harder. If something went really wrong, if the infection spread to her blood, if another seizure didn't stop, if any one of a dozen complications kicked in, there was nothing he could do. He wasn't a doctor, he was a rancher with a first aid kit and good intentions, and that wasn't going to be enough if this went sideways. Stop looking at me like I'm already dead, Evelyn said. Cole blinked. I'm not. You are. I can see it on your face, that look people get when they're trying to figure out how to tell you bad news. She met his eyes. I'm not dying. Not today, anyway. How can you be so sure? Because I'm too pissed off to die. Still got too much to prove. To who? Your father's been gone 7 years. To myself. She shifted against the pillows, wincing. You think I spent all this time building something just to let it fall apart the first time things got hard? No. I survived this. I keep going. Simple as that. Cole sat back on his heels. You know, most people in your situation would be scared. Who says I'm not scared? Are you? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Terrified. Have been since the accident, but being scared doesn't change what needs to happen. Still gotta survive, still gotta keep the ranch going. Fear's just background noise. That's a hell of a way to live. It's the only way I know. Cole understood that better than he wanted to admit. He'd spent 8 years pushing through the fear that Daniel's death had left behind, fear that he'd fail someone else, fear that he wasn't strong enough or smart enough or fast enough when it mattered. The ranch had been his anchor, hard work the remedy for thinking too much. Looking at Evelyn now, he saw the same pattern. Different details, same basic shape. Two people trying to outrun ghosts by working themselves to death. "We're both idiots," he said. "Took you this long to figure that out?" "I'm a slow learner." She smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. "At least you're honest about it." The rest of the day passed in a strange kind of domesticity. Cole kept the fire going, prepared what passed for meals from their dwindling supplies, checked on Ranger in the barn. Evelyn drifted in and out of sleep, her fever climbing and falling like tides. The dogs maintained their vigil, Cisco at her head and Bear at her feet, both watching Cole with eyes that seemed to ask if he knew what he was doing. "Not really," he told them during one of Evelyn's deeper sleeps, "but we're making it up as we go." Bear's tail thumped once against the floor. Cisco continued to look skeptical. By evening, Evelyn was awake and restless. The fever had dropped to something almost normal, and with it came the return of her personality, which meant she was bored, frustrated, and looking for someone to argue with. "I should be doing something," she announced from the couch. "You are doing something. You're healing. That's not doing something. That's just lying here being useless." Cole looked up from the pot of soup he was heating, canned chicken noodle from her pantry, probably older than the truck outside. "You had a seizure this morning. Lying there being useless is exactly what you should be doing. The ranch doesn't run itself. The ranch is fine. The cattle are fine. Everything's fine." "You checked on them again?" "This morning. All present and accounted for." "What about the water heater?" "Still working." "The fence line on the east pasture. There's a section that was weak before the storm. If the snow weight brought it down..." "Evelyn." Cole set down the spoon and turned to face her. "I will check the fence. I will check the cattle. I will check every damn thing on this ranch if it'll make you feel better. But you need to accept that you can't do it yourself right now." "I don't need to accept anything." "Yeah, you do, because this..." He gestured at her leg, at the pallor in her face, at the way she couldn't sit up without help. "This is what happens when you try to do everything alone. You nearly died. You understand that? Another day, maybe 2, and I would have found a body instead of a person." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but he didn't take them back. Someone needed to say it. Evelyn stared at him, jaw tight. "You don't know what it's like." "Don't I? I run a ranch too. I know about the work, the responsibility, the weight of keeping everything going, but I also know when to ask for help." "Do you? Because from what I've seen, you rode 200 miles alone through a blizzard instead of calling for backup. Doesn't sound like asking for help to me." Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She had a point. "Fine," he said. "We're both terrible at it, but at least I'm trying to learn." "By lecturing me?" "By being honest with you. Someone's got to be." They glared at each other across the small room, and Cole could see her working through it, the anger, the pride, the deep-seated need to prove she didn't need anyone. He'd seen the same fight in the mirror often enough to recognize it. Finally, Evelyn sighed. "The east fence. If it's down, the cattle could drift into Morrison's property. Dutch would send them back, but it'd be a mess." "I'll check it tomorrow." "And the barn roof, there's a section on the south side that was leaking. With all this snow, I'll check that too. The truck needs the battery pulled if we're not using it, otherwise the cold will kill it." "Consider it done." She studied him for a long moment. "You're serious? You're actually going to take care of all this?" "That's why I'm here." "I thought you were here to keep me from dying." "I can do both." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. Cole could have given her a dozen easy answers, because it needed doing, because he had nothing better to do, because Dutch Morrison had asked. But Evelyn deserved better than easy answers. "Because I know what it's like to watch something you built start to fall apart," he said quietly. "After my father died, the ranch went to hell for a while. I was too busy being angry and guilty to notice the maintenance slipping, the books getting messy, the whole operation starting to crack. By the time I pulled my head out, we were 6 months from bankruptcy. What did you do? Got help. Hired Marcus as foreman, brought in a bookkeeper, stopped trying to prove I could do my father's job exactly the way he did it. Hardest thing I ever did, admitting I couldn't handle it alone. But you did handle it, got the ranch back on track. Yeah, but only after I almost lost everything because I was too proud to ask for help when I needed it. He met her eyes. Sound familiar? Evelyn looked away first. I'm not good at this. At what? Accepting help. Trusting people. Any of it. Her voice went quiet. My father, he was a hard man. Good rancher, terrible parent. Everything I did was wrong, or not good enough, or proof that I couldn't hack it. When he died and I took over, I swore I'd never give anyone else the chance to tell me I was failing. So you cut yourself off. So I proved I could do it alone, and I did. For 7 years I made this ranch work without asking anyone for a damn thing. And now I'm lying on my couch with a leg that might need amputating, being kept alive by a stranger who rode through a blizzard because an old man made a phone call. She laughed bitterly. Not exactly the independent success story I was going for. Cole ladled soup into 2 bowls, brought one to her. You know what I think? I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you did prove yourself. 7 years running this place solo, that's impressive as hell. But I also think you're confusing independence with isolation, and they're not the same thing. Aren't they? No. Independence means making your own choices, standing on your own 2 feet. Isolation means cutting yourself off from help when you need it. You can be independent and still accept help. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Evelyn took the soup, stared into it like it might have answers. Easy to say when you're not the one who spent their whole life being told they're not enough. You're right, it is easier for me, but that doesn't make it less true. They ate in silence for a while. The soup was terrible, oversalted and with noodles that had the texture of wet paper, but it was hot, and it was food, and neither of them was in a position to complain. My mother left when I was 6, Evelyn said suddenly. Just packed a bag one day and drove off. Never came back. My father told everyone she couldn't handle ranch life, but I think the truth was she couldn't handle him. He was controlling, had to be in charge of everything. When she pushed back, he pushed harder. Eventually, she just broke. That must have been hard. I blamed myself for a long time. Thought if I'd been better, easier, more like what they wanted, maybe she would have stayed. So I tried to be what my father needed, tough, capable, never complaining. Thought if I proved I could handle anything, maybe he'd finally say I was good enough. Did he? No. He died still thinking I'd sell the ranch as soon as he was gone. She set down her empty bowl. That's why I can't fail at this, Cole. Because if I do, he wins. Even dead, he wins. Cole wanted to tell her that her father's opinion didn't matter anymore, that she'd already proved everything that needed proving. But he knew she wouldn't hear it. Some battles had to be won internally, in the quiet spaces where logic didn't reach. You're not failing, he said instead. You're surviving. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah. Failing would be giving up. You haven't done that. I came pretty close. But you didn't. That counts for something. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression shifted. You're an odd man, Cole Bennett. I've been told. No, I mean it. You show up in the middle of a blizzard to save a stranger, nearly kill yourself doing it, and then stick around to fix fences and check on cattle that aren't even yours. Why? Cole thought about Daniel, about his father, about all the ways he'd tried to outrun guilt by working himself to exhaustion. About Marcus's words before he'd left. You're trying to rewrite history. Maybe I'm trying to prove something too, he admitted. To who? To myself, I guess. That I can be the person who shows up when it matters. That I don't have to fail everyone who needs me. You didn't fail your brother. Didn't I? If I tried harder to stop him, he still would have gone. People make their own choices, Cole. You can't control that. And you can't control that your mother left, or that your father was an ass, or that a barn beam gave out. But we both keep trying anyway, don't we? Evelyn smiled, sad and knowing. Yeah, we do. Outside, the wind had picked up again, though not with the fury of the earlier storm. Just a steady presence, a reminder that winter wasn't done with them yet. "Storm's coming back," Evelyn said, hearing the same thing he did. "Radio said there's another system moving in tomorrow night. Not as bad as the last one, but bad enough. We need to be ready." "We will be. I'll get more wood inside, make sure we have plenty of water, check the generator." He paused. "And I'll check that east fence and the barn roof." "You don't have to." "I know, I want to." She nodded slowly. "Okay, thank you." The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Cole stepped outside to air that felt like broken glass in his lungs, and a sun that gave light but no warmth. The thermometer read -18. Ranger greeted him with a resigned snort that clearly said, "We're doing this again?" "Just a few hours," Cole promised. "Check the fence, check the roof, back before the next storm hits." The horse didn't look convinced, but he stood still while Cole saddled up. The ride to the east fence line took longer than it should have. Snow had drifted across every low point, and Ranger had to break trail through chest-deep powder in places. By the time they reached the fence, both horse and rider were breathing hard. The fence was down, just as Evelyn had feared. A 40-foot section had collapsed under the snow weight. Posts snapped clean through, wire tangled in the drifts. Two of Evelyn's cattle had already wandered through the gap and were grazing on Morrison's side. "Damn it!" Cole dismounted and assessed the damage. He'd need tools, replacement posts, new wire, all of which were back at the barn, naturally. He couldn't fix it today, but he could mark it, keep the cattle from drifting further. He spent an hour rigging a temporary barrier using rope and what intact posts remained, then herded the two stray cattle back through the gap. They went reluctantly, because cattle were creatures of habit, and this wasn't their routine, but eventually he got them moving in the right direction. The barn roof was next on the list. Cole climbed up using a ladder that probably should have been condemned years ago, and found the leak Evelyn had mentioned. The shingles around it were curled and brittle, and the wood beneath had started to rot. "Should have been fixed months ago," he muttered, echoing Evelyn's earlier words. But it hadn't been, because there was always something more urgent, always another crisis demanding attention, always tomorrow to deal with the problems that could wait. Except sometimes tomorrow never came. Cole patched what he could with materials from Evelyn's workshop, tar paper and roofing cement that had frozen solid and needed thawing by the fire. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it would hold through the winter. Come spring, the whole section would need replacing. By the time he finished and rode back to the house, the sun was already dropping toward the western hills and the temperature with it. -22 now, headed for -30 by midnight. Evelyn was awake when he came in, looking better than she had since the seizure. The fever was down, her color was better, and she'd managed to sit up on her own. "Well?" she asked. "Fence is down, just like you thought. I patched it temporary, but it'll need a proper fix come spring. Roof's leaking worse than you said, but I got it sealed enough to get through winter." "The cattle?" "Had two on Morrison's side, brought them back. Rest are still grouped up at the shelter." She exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. That fence fix won't hold if we get wind, and the roof patch is held together with hope and tar paper. Still more than I could have done alone." Cole shed his coat and moved to the fire, trying to thaw out. His hands were numb despite the heavy gloves, and his face felt like someone had been hitting it with a hammer. "You look half frozen," Evelyn observed. "Feel about 3/4 frozen." "Come here." He looked at her, surprised. She'd pulled back one of the blankets, making space beside her on the couch. "Body heat," she explained, seeing his hesitation. "You share yours, I'll share mine. Better than freezing to death 6 feet apart out of some misplaced sense of propriety." Cole hesitated another second, then gave in. He was too cold to be proud, and she was right. Body heat was body heat. He settled beside her on the couch, careful not to jostle her leg, and she pulled the blanket over both of them. The warmth was immediate and shocking. He hadn't realized how cold he'd gotten until he felt the heat radiating off her. "Better?" she asked. "Yeah, thanks." They sat like that for a while, listening to the fire and the wind and the creaking of the old house around them. The dogs curled up at their feet, adding their own warmth to the pile. "This is weird," Evelyn said after a while. "What is?" "This. Us. A week ago I didn't know you existed. Now you're sharing a blanket with me on my couch and fixing my fences. Life's strange that way." You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come? If Dutch hadn't called, or you decided it wasn't worth the risk? Cole had thought about it more than once. You would have died. Probably. And you'd be back at your ranch, warm and safe, never knowing I existed. But I did come, so we don't have to think about the alternative. Still, it's strange how much can change based on one decision. You deciding to ride out, me deciding to check that barn loft. Small choices with big consequences. That's life. String of small choices, most of which don't matter until suddenly they do. Evelyn shifted slightly, getting comfortable. What made you say yes? When Dutch called, what made you decide to come? I don't know. Gut feeling, I guess. Something about the way he said your name, worried but also respectful. Like he knew you'd hate that he was calling for help on your behalf, but he did it anyway because it was the right thing. Sounds like Dutch. And then I thought about someone dying alone in the cold, and I thought about Daniel, and I just couldn't not go. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. They fell quiet again. Outside, the light was fading fast, the short winter day giving way to the long night. The temperature would drop further, the wind would pick up. The next storm would roll in right on schedule, but inside for now there was warmth and food and the strange comfort of shared survival. Cole? Evelyn's voice was soft. Yeah? I'm glad you came, even if I was a complete ass about it at first. You had every right to be. I barged into your house like I owned the place. Still, you saved my life. That counts for something. You would have done the same for me. Would I? I'd like to think so, but honestly, I don't know. I've spent so long pushing people away, I'm not sure I'd even know how to help if someone needed me. Cole turned to look at her. In the firelight, her face was all sharp angles and shadows, but there was something vulnerable in her expression that hadn't been there before. You helped me, he said. You told me where to find the cattle, how to fix the fence. You're helping right now, keeping me from freezing to death through sheer stubbornness. She laughed. That's not help, that's just survival. Sometimes they're the same thing. Evelyn met his eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. Two people who'd spent too long alone, finding unexpected connection in the worst possible circumstances. We should eat something, she said finally, before we both fall asleep and let the fire die. Good idea. But neither of them moved. The warmth was too good, the comfort too rare. Outside, winter pressed against the walls with patient malice. Inside, for just a little while longer, they held it at bay together. The second storm hit exactly when the radio said it would, rolling in around midnight with winds that made the house shudder on its foundation. Cole woke to the sound of something metallic tearing loose outside. The barn door, maybe, or part of the roof he'd just patched. He started to get up, but Evelyn's hand caught his arm. Don't, she said. Whatever it is, it's already gone. You go out there now, you'll just get yourself killed. I can't just let the barn fall apart. You can and you will. We'll deal with it when the sun's up and the wind dies down. Right now, you stay put. Cole wanted to argue, but the iron grip on his arm told him it would be pointless. Evelyn might be injured and weak, but her stubbornness was fully operational. Fine, he muttered, settling back down. But if the whole barn collapses, then we rebuild it in the spring. It's just a building, Cole. Buildings can be replaced, says the woman who nearly died protecting her ranch. Yeah, well, I'm learning. She released his arm. Besides, I need you alive more than I need that barn standing. You're more useful. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me. Don't let it go to your head. They lay there listening to the storm rage, the wind finding every crack and gap in the old house's armor. The fire burned low despite Cole's efforts to keep it fed. The chimney was drawing wrong, probably snow blocking the cap, and the temperature inside dropped steadily toward uncomfortable. Tell me about your ranch, Evelyn said after a while. The one you nearly lost. Cole shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make his ribs ache. A week of sleeping on floors and couches was catching up with him. Not much to tell. 3,000 acres, mixed cattle and horses. Been in my family since 1891. That's a lot of history to almost lose. Yeah, my father built it up from what his father left him. Turned it into something really successful. When he died, I thought I could just step into his shoes and everything would keep running the same way. But it didn't. Not even close. Turns out there's a difference between working on a ranch and running one. All the stuff he handled that I never paid attention to, the books, the contracts, the planning, suddenly it was all on me, and I had no idea what I was doing. So what changed? I got desperate enough to ask for help. Marcus, my foreman, he sat me down one day and told me straight that I was driving us into the ground. Said if I didn't hire a bookkeeper and let him handle more of the operations, we'd be bankrupt by Christmas. That must have been hard to hear. It was. But he was right. So I swallowed my pride, hired people who knew what they were doing, and started actually learning the business instead of just trying to muscle through on determination alone. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. How long did it take to turn things around? About 2 years before we were stable, another year after that before we were actually profitable again. There were times I thought we weren't going to make it. But you did. Yeah, we did. Cole paused. What about you? What's your plan once you're back on your feet? You mean besides trying to salvage what's left of this season? Yeah, long term. You going to keep running this place alone? He felt her tense beside him. Why wouldn't I? Because you almost died, Evelyn. And even if you heal up fine, you're still one person trying to do the work of 3. That's not sustainable. I've sustained it for 7 years. Barely. And at what cost? At whatever cost it takes. Her voice had gone sharp. This ranch is mine. My legacy. I'm not giving it up just because things got hard. I'm not saying give it up. I'm saying maybe consider a different approach. Hire some help. Take on a partner. Something that doesn't require you to work yourself to death. I can't afford help. Can you afford to break your other leg or worse? That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's reality. Evelyn pulled away from him, sitting up despite the obvious pain it caused. You don't get it. If I bring someone else in, if I admit I can't handle this alone, then everyone who said I'd fail was right. My father was right. Your father's dead, and his opinion doesn't matter anymore. Easy for you to say. You didn't spend your whole childhood being told you weren't good enough. Cole sat up too, facing her in the dim light. You're right. I didn't. But I did spend 8 years trying to live up to a dead man's legacy and nearly destroying everything in the process. So I know a little something about letting go of ghosts. This isn't the same. Isn't it? You're so focused on proving something to a man who can't even hear you that you're willing to kill yourself doing it. How is that different? Because I'm still alive to see it through. That's the difference. They glared at each other, and Cole could feel the conversation spiraling toward a fight neither of them needed. He forced himself to take a breath, to step back from the edge. Look, he said more quietly, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to help you see that there are options. Ways to keep the ranch and still survive the experience. Like what? Selling off more land? Going into debt to hire people I can't afford? Those aren't options, Cole. Those are just different flavors of failure. What if you had a partner? Someone who could invest capital, share the workload, split the responsibility? Evelyn laughed, bitter and tired. And where exactly am I supposed to find this magical partner? You volunteering? The question hung in the air between them. Cole opened his mouth to deflect, to make a joke, to move past the moment. But something stopped him. Maybe I am, he heard himself say. Evelyn stared at him. What? Maybe I am volunteering. My ranch is doing well. I could invest. We could merge operations, combine resources. You keep your land, your independence, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. You're insane. Probably. But think about it. 2 ranches, adjacent properties, we could run them as one operation. More efficient, more profitable, more sustainable. We've known each other for a week. And in that week, I've seen you at your absolute worst, and I'm still here. I've seen how you run this place, how you think, how you handle crisis. I know what kind of rancher you are. You know I'm stubborn and prideful and almost got myself killed. Yeah, and I also know you're smart, capable, and built something impressive with almost no resources. Imagine what you could do with actual support. Evelyn shook her head slowly. This is crazy. You don't make decisions like this on impulse. Who says it's impulse? I've been thinking about it for days. Days. You've been thinking about completely restructuring both our lives for days. Sometimes you know things quickly, and I know this could work. Based on what? A feeling? Based on the fact that we work well together. Based on the fact that I trust your judgment, and I think you trust mine, based on the fact that we both understand what this life costs, and we're both willing to pay it. Evelyn looked away toward the fire. You're asking me to give up control of my ranch. I'm asking you to share control. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want to come in and take over. Do I strike you as the type who could take over from you even if I wanted to? That got a small smile. No, I'd probably kill you if you tried. Exactly. So this would have to be a true partnership. Equal say, equal responsibility, equal ownership. You'd really do that? Split your successful ranch with someone you barely know? Cole met her eyes. Yeah, I would, because I think together we could build something better than either of us could manage alone. And because... He paused, not sure he should finish the thought. Because what? Because I'm tired of being alone too. I just didn't realize it until I got here. The admission cost him something. He could see the recognition in Evelyn's eyes. She knew what it meant to confess that kind of loneliness. This is insane, she said again, but with less conviction. Most good ideas are. We should think about it. Take time, not make rash decisions while we're trapped in a storm and you're suffering from some kind of savior complex. Fair enough, we can table it for now, but promise me you'll actually think about it, not just dismiss it out of hand. Evelyn nodded slowly. I'll think about it, but I'm not making any promises beyond that. That's all I'm asking. They settled back down, the tension easing but not disappearing entirely. Outside, the storm continued its assault, and somewhere in the darkness, something else tore loose with a crash that made them both wince. There goes something else, Cole muttered. We'll fix it in the morning. You're getting better at this letting go thing. Don't push your luck. By dawn, the storm had blown itself out, leaving behind a landscape that looked like it had been hit by artillery. The barn door hung by one hinge, half the chicken coop had collapsed, and the temporary fence repair Cole had made was scattered across 50 yards of snow. Could be worse, Cole said, surveying the damage. How? Evelyn asked from the doorway, leaning on the crutch he'd made her from a broken shovel handle. Could be on fire. That's your standard? As long as it's not actively burning, we're good? Low expectations make for pleasant surprises. She snorted, but didn't argue. The fever had broken completely overnight, and while she was still weak and her leg was still a mess, there was color in her face and clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. You shouldn't be standing, Cole said. I've been lying down for a week. If I don't stand up, I'm going to lose my mind. At least stay on the porch. Last thing we need is you falling and breaking something else. Yes, Mother. Cole spent the next 3 hours doing triage. The barn door got rehung, badly, but functional. The chicken coop was a loss, but they could rebuild it when the weather cleared. The fence would need a complete redo, but for now, he just gathered the cattle and moved them to a different pasture where the fencing was intact. Throughout it all, Evelyn watched from the porch, occasionally shouting instructions or corrections. Cole took the input without complaint. It was her ranch, after all, and she knew it better than he ever would. Around noon, the satellite phone beeped. Cole practically dove for it, fumbling the device out of his pocket. Signal. Finally, actual signal. 3 messages from Marcus, each one progressively more worried. 2 from Dutch Morrison asking if he'd found Evelyn. 1 from the county asking if he needed emergency services. He called Marcus first. Jesus Christ, Cole, where the hell have you been? Nice to hear your voice too. I'm fine, thanks for asking. Are you fine? Because you've been radio silent for over a week and I was about to organize a search party. I'm fine. Found Evelyn Carter alive, barely. She had a broken leg, bad infection, hypothermia. Been keeping her alive and waiting for the weather to clear. There was a pause. She's going to make it? Yeah, she's tough as nails. Fever finally broke last night. And you? You sound exhausted. I am exhausted, but I'm okay. Listen, I need you to do something for me. Name it. Call the county. Tell them we need a medical transport as soon as the roads are passable. Evelyn needs proper medical care. Antibiotics we don't have. And call Doc Hansen, see if he can meet us halfway if needed. Consider it done. When are you coming home? Cole glanced toward the porch where Evelyn was arguing with one of the dogs about something. Not sure yet. There's work to do here and I need to make sure she's stable before I leave. Cole, I know what you're going to say, but I'm seeing this through, Marcus. She needs help, and I'm here. End of story. Another pause. You're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Define stupid. I don't know. Offering to merge ranches with a woman you've known for a week? Cole felt his stomach drop. How did you? I've known you since you were in diapers. I can hear it in your voice. You're planning something. It's not stupid. It's practical. Two adjacent ranches, both struggling with labor, both needing capital. Combined, we'd be stronger. And that's the only reason? What other reason would there be? You tell me. You're the one who rode 200 miles through a blizzard for a stranger. Marcus, just be careful, okay? I know you want to help people. I know you feel like you failed your brother. But don't confuse guilt with good judgment. That's not what this is, if you say so. But maybe think about it before you make any life-changing decisions. That's all I'm asking. I'll think about it. Good. Now get that woman to a doctor before her leg falls off. Cole ended the call and stood there for a moment, phone in hand, wondering if Marcus was right. Was he confusing guilt with judgment? Was this whole partnership idea just another attempt to rewrite history, to save someone in a way he hadn't been able to save Daniel? Bad news? Evelyn called from the porch. Cole pocketed the phone and walked back to the house. No, good news actually. County's sending medical transport as soon as the road's clear. Probably 2 days, 3 at most. Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or fear. That fast? You need proper medical care. The antibiotics I had are running out, and that leg needs x-rays, maybe surgery. I can't afford. We'll figure it out, one problem at a time. Evelyn nodded, but she looked shaken. 2 days. Yeah. And then what? Then you heal. Then we rebuild what the storm broke. Then we figure out the rest. The partnership thing, you were serious about that. Dead serious. My foreman thinks I'm acting on guilt and impulse. Cole smiled. Mine thinks the same thing. Maybe they're right. Maybe. Or maybe they're just as scared of change as we used to be. Used to be? Yeah, I think we're both getting better at it. Out of necessity, if nothing else. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. If we did this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we did, how would it even work? We'd need contracts, lawyers, a whole legal structure. We would. And we'd need to agree on management structure, decision-making processes, all the boring stuff that keeps partnerships from imploding. You've really thought this through. I've had a lot of time in the last few days. Not much else to do while you were sleeping off fevers. And you still think it could work? Cole looked out at the ranch, damaged, snow-buried, barely hanging on. Then he looked at Evelyn, injured, exhausted, but still standing. 2 survivors in a harsh land, both too stubborn to quit. Yeah, he said, I do. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. They worked when they could, Cole handling the heavy labor, Evelyn directing from wherever she could prop herself up. They ate meals together, shared the warmth of the fire, talked about everything and nothing. And slowly, almost without realizing it, they started planning. The south pasture would be better for calving, Evelyn said over dinner on the second night. It's more sheltered, better drainage. Yeah, but your barn's in rough shape. We'd need to invest in renovations before we could handle increased capacity. Unless we used your facilities for calving and kept the yearlings here. That could work. Would mean more transport, but the efficiency gains might be worth it. They weren't explicitly talking about the partnership, but they weren't not talking about it either. On the morning of the 3rd day, they heard the sound of engines in the distance. Cole stepped outside to see 3 county trucks making their way up the access road, plows mounted on the front, carving a path through the snow. Behind them, an ambulance. They're here, he called back to Evelyn. She appeared in the doorway, still on her makeshift crutch. That was fast. Marcus must have called in favors. The lead truck pulled up to the house, and a man in a thick coat jumped out. Evelyn Carter? That's me. We're here to transport you to County Medical. How are you doing? Still alive, which is more than I expected a week ago. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher despite her protests. Cole packed her a bag, extra clothes, her father's old wallet with the ranch papers, a photo album she'd pointed out earlier. You coming with? One of the paramedics asked him. Cole looked at Evelyn. She looked back, and something unspoken passed between them. "Yeah," he said. "I'm coming." At the hospital, they cleaned and debrided Evelyn's wound properly, pumped her full of IV antibiotics, and confirmed what Cole had suspected. The bone had healed crooked and would need to be rebroken and reset. Surgery was scheduled for the following morning. 6 weeks minimum before she's weight-bearing, the doctor told Cole in the hallway. 12 before she's back to full activity. And that's if everything goes perfectly. "She's going to lose her mind," Cole said. "Most ranchers do. You family?" "Partner," Cole said, and realized as he said it that he meant it. The doctor nodded. "Good. She's going to need support, both for the recovery and for the ranch work she can't do." "She'll have it." That evening, Cole sat beside Evelyn's hospital bed, watching her sleep off the sedatives they'd given her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the sterile environment and the machines beeping around her. But she was alive. Against all odds, despite every mistake and misfortune, she was alive. "You're staring," she mumbled without opening her eyes. "Sorry, didn't realize you were awake." "Hard to sleep with all this noise." She gestured vaguely at the monitors. "Too quiet at the ranch. This feels wrong." "You'll be back there soon." 6 weeks, the doctor said. "Minimum." "I heard. Can't run a ranch from a hospital bed?" "No, but you can run one with a partner who handles the physical work while you recover." Evelyn opened her eyes then, looking at him directly. "You're really not going to let this go, are you?" "Not a chance." "Why?" "What's in it for you? Besides a successful ranch, a reliable partner, and the satisfaction of building something that matters." Cole leaned forward. "Honestly, I think we could be good together. Not despite our stubbornness, but because of it. We push each other. We don't let each other quit. That's worth something. It's also a recipe for constant arguing. Probably. But I'd rather argue with someone who challenges me than agree with someone who doesn't." Evelyn smiled. "You're a strange man, Cole Bennett. You've mentioned that before." "I know. I keep hoping you'll take the hint and run away." "Not going to happen." She was quiet for a long moment. "If we do this, and I'm still not saying we are, but if we do, I need to know something." "What? Is this really about the ranch? Or is this about fixing something in yourself that you think is broken?" The question cut right to the core of it. Cole could have deflected, could have given her an easy answer, but she deserved the truth. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe it's both. Maybe I'm trying to prove I can save someone, and maybe that's not the healthiest motivation. But I also genuinely think this could work, that we could build something good together. Both things can be true. And if it fails, if we try this and it doesn't work out, then we fail having tried. That's better than failing because we were too scared to take the chance." Evelyn reached out and Cole took her hand. Her grip was still weak, but it was there. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? Okay, let's do it. Let's be partners. Let's build something together and see where it goes." Cole felt something in his chest loosen. Relief, joy, fear, all mixed together. "You're sure?" "No, but I don't think I'm supposed to be sure. I think that's the whole point. We'll need lawyers." "We will. And we'll probably fight about everything. Definitely. And there's no guarantee it'll work." "Nothing's guaranteed, Cole. But you rode 200 miles through a blizzard to save my life. That's a pretty good foundation to build on." He laughed, surprised by the truth of it. "Yeah, I guess it is." Outside the hospital window, snow had started falling again. But it was light snow this time, gentle and almost peaceful. The worst of the winter was over. Spring would come, bringing with it all the hard work of rebuilding and replanting and starting fresh. But for now, in this moment, two people who'd nearly died alone had found something neither of them had been looking for. A partnership forged in survival, tempered by stubbornness and built on the shaky foundation of hope that maybe, just maybe, they were stronger together than they'd ever been apart. The surgery went better than expected, which Evelyn said was just the universe's way of setting her up for disappointment later. The surgeon had rebroken the bone, set it properly, and installed enough hardware that she joked about setting off metal detectors for the rest of her life. "At least I'll have a good excuse at airports," she said from her hospital bed the day after surgery. "You planning on traveling a lot?" Cole asked. "No, but it's nice to have options." Marcus arrived that afternoon, driving Cole's truck and bringing news from both ranches. He looked at Evelyn for a long moment, then at Cole, then back at Evelyn. "So you're the woman who convinced my boss to make the second stupidest decision of his life," he said. "Second?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "What was the first?" "Riding 200 miles through a blizzard to find you." "Fair point." She extended her hand. "Evelyn Carter. I'd stand up, but the doctor said that's frowned upon for the next 6 weeks." Marcus shook her hand, his weathered face cracking into something that might have been a smile. "Marcus Webb, I've been keeping Cole out of trouble for 40 years, so I figure I can handle 2 stubborn ranchers instead of 1. "You think this partnership is a mistake," Cole said. It wasn't a question. "I think it's risky, poorly timed, and based on emotions rather than business sense." Marcus pulled up a chair. "I also think it might be exactly what both ranches need, so yeah, I have concerns. But I'm not going to stand in your way." "That's almost touching," Evelyn said. "Don't get used to it. I saved the sentiment for special occasions." Marcus pulled out a folder. "Now, if we're doing this, we're doing it right. I took the liberty of contacting a lawyer who specializes in ranch partnerships. She can draft the contracts, handle the merger logistics, make sure nobody gets screwed." Cole took the folder, flipped through the documents inside. "You've been busy. Someone has to be the adult in the room. Your ranch is running fine. The boys have everything under control. Miss Carter's ranch, on the other hand, is a disaster," Evelyn finished. "I know. The storm did a number on it. The storm, and 3 weeks of neglect before that. No offense. None taken. I was too busy dying to keep up with maintenance." "Well, you're not dying anymore, so we need to address it. I took a ride over there yesterday, made a list." Marcus handed her a second folder. Evelyn read through it, her expression growing darker with each page. "This is worse than I thought. The barn's salvageable, but it needs major work. The chicken coop's a loss, the fence repairs Cole did won't hold through spring, and the house—" Marcus trailed off. "The house what?" "The foundation's cracking, has been for a while from the looks of it. You add the weight of all that snow and we're looking at structural damage." Evelyn closed the folder, her jaw tight. "How much?" "To fix everything properly? 40,000, minimum, maybe more." The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Cole saw Evelyn do the math in her head, saw the exact moment she realized what it meant. "I don't have $40,000, she said quietly. "I don't have $10,000. The accident wiped out what little savings I had. Lost 3 weeks of work, lost income, lost everything." "Which is why the partnership makes sense," Cole said. "We pool resources. My ranch generates enough profit to cover the repairs. We fix your property, merge the operations, split the proceeds going forward. That's not a partnership, that's charity." "No, it's an investment. Your land is worth something. Your expertise is worth something. We're not giving you money. We're investing in a joint venture that benefits both of us." Marcus nodded. "He's right. The combined operation would be more valuable than either ranch alone. You bring 300 acres of prime grazing land and 7 years of operational knowledge. He brings capital and infrastructure. Together, you're looking at a ranch that could gross $500,000 annually within 3 years. Evelyn looked between them. "You've really thought this through." "We have," Cole said. "And I know it's fast and I know it's scary, but sometimes the best opportunities come from the worst circumstances." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the numbers in Marcus's folder. Then she looked up at Cole. "Equal partners?" she asked. 50-50 ownership, 50-50 decision-making, 50-50 profit split. "And if we disagree on something major? We figure it out, like adults, or we argue about it until one of us gives in. Whatever works. And if it doesn't work? If we try this and it falls apart?" Cole met her eyes. "Then we split the assets fairly and go our separate ways, but I don't think it's going to fall apart." "Why not?" "Because we're both too stubborn to let it fail." That got a real laugh out of her. "That's your business plan? Stubbornness?" "It's gotten us this far." Evelyn looked at Marcus. "What do you think? Honestly?" Marcus leaned back in his chair considering. "Honestly, I think you're both crazy. But I also think crazy might be exactly what the situation needs. The ranching business is changing. Small operations can't compete anymore. But 2 small operations combining into 1 medium operation? That's got potential. So you're on board? I'm on board, but we do this right. Legal contracts, clear boundaries, regular communication. None of this handshake and hope for the best nonsense. Agreed, Cole said. Evelyn nodded slowly. Okay, let's do it. Let's actually do this. The lawyer's name was Patricia Chen, and she had the kind of no-nonsense efficiency that made both Cole and Evelyn sit up straighter. She arrived at the hospital the next day with contracts, questions, and a sharp understanding of exactly what could go wrong in a partnership. The biggest issue in these arrangements is usually decision-making, she said, spreading papers across the rolling table that served as Evelyn's desk. You need clear protocols for who decides what and what happens when you disagree. What do other partnerships do? Evelyn asked. Depends. Some have a senior partner who gets final say. Some require unanimous agreement on major decisions. Some bring in a third-party mediator. We're equals, Cole said firmly. No senior partner. Then you need a dispute resolution process. I'd suggest a 3-tier system. Discussion first, then mediation, then if all else fails, binding arbitration. Sounds expensive, Evelyn said. Cheaper than a lawsuit, trust me. They spent the next 3 hours going through every possible scenario. What happened if one partner wanted to sell? What happened if one died? What happened if the ranch went bankrupt? What happened if they decided they hated each other? Patricia didn't pull punches, forcing them to confront ugly possibilities they'd both been avoiding. This is depressing, Evelyn said after they'd finished the section on dissolution procedures. This is protection, Patricia corrected. You're both going into this with good intentions. But intentions change, circumstances change, people change. The contract is there to protect you when that happens. You must be fun at parties, Cole said. I don't go to parties, I prevent disasters. She gathered the papers. I'll have the final drafts ready in a week. Look them over, make sure you understand every clause, then we'll make it official. After she left, Cole and Evelyn sat in silence for a while. That was intense, Evelyn finally said. Yeah. You still want to do this? Cole thought about it, really thought about it. Not just the romantic notion of partnership, but the reality of binding himself legally and financially to someone he'd known for 2 weeks. It was reckless. It was risky. It was probably the kind of decision he'd look back on and wonder what he'd been thinking. Yeah, he said. I do. Me too. Which probably means we're both idiots. Probably, but at least we're idiots together. Evelyn was discharged from the hospital 5 days later, with a new cast, a bottle of painkillers, and strict orders to stay off her leg for 6 weeks. Cole drove her back to her ranch, where Marcus and a crew of workers were already deep into repairs. I hired them on your behalf, Marcus said when Evelyn started to protest. Consider it the partnership's first major expense. We need the property functional before spring. The barn was first on the list. They replaced the rotten beams, patched the roof properly, reinforced the whole structure. The chicken coop got rebuilt from scratch. The fencing was torn out and replaced with something that would actually last. And the house got the foundation work it had needed for years, plus new windows, new insulation, and a chimney cleaning that revealed a bird's nest the size of a basketball. No wonder the fire wasn't drawing right, Cole said, staring at the debris. Evelyn watched it all from the porch, directing when she could, biting her tongue when she couldn't. Cole could see the frustration building in her, the need to be doing instead of observing, to be in control instead of dependent. This is killing you, he said one afternoon, sitting beside her. I can't even check on my own cattle without help. Of course it's killing me. They're not just your cattle anymore, they're our cattle. Doesn't make it easier. I know. Cole was quiet for a moment. You want to know something my father told me once? What? He said the hardest thing about getting older wasn't the aches and pains. It was learning to trust other people to do the work you used to do yourself. Said it felt like losing a part of who you were. Smart man. He had his moments, but he was also wrong about something. What? He thought accepting help meant admitting weakness. Took me years to figure out it actually means the opposite. It means being strong enough to recognize your limitations and smart enough to build a team that covers them. Evelyn looked at him. You're getting philosophical in your old age. I'm 46. That's not old. It's not young either. Fair point. Cole stretched, feeling every one of those 46 years in his back. But seriously, you're not losing yourself by accepting help. You're expanding what you can do by having people you trust to do it with you. People, plural. Well, me and Marcus, and the crew, and eventually whoever else we hire as the operation grows. This is really happening, isn't it? We're really doing this. Yeah, we really are. The contracts were signed on a Tuesday in March, in Patricia Chen's office with Marcus as witness. Cole and Evelyn each signed a dozen places, initialed a dozen more, and officially became equal partners in what was now called the Bennett Carter Ranch. Congratulations, Patricia said, handing them each a copy. You're now legally bound to each other in ways that would make a marriage look simple. That's romantic, Evelyn said dryly. I don't do romance. I do legally binding documents. But for what it's worth, I think you two might actually make this work. High praise from you, Cole said. Don't let it go to your head. Now get out of my office. I have real disasters to prevent. They celebrated that night at the ranch, both ranches technically, since they were now one property. Marcus grilled steaks, the crew brought beer, and for a few hours they just let themselves be happy about what they'd built. Speech, someone called out. Cole looked at Evelyn. She rolled her eyes but gestured for him to go ahead. Okay, he said, standing. I'm not good at speeches, but I wanted to say something about what we're doing here. A few months ago, both our operations were struggling. We were both doing everything alone, both trying to prove we didn't need help, both slowly drowning without admitting it. And then a barn beam broke and a storm hit, and somehow that disaster turned into this. He gestured at the gathering around them, the combined crews, the repaired buildings, the sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. I don't know if this is going to work long term, he continued. We're going to fight. We're going to disagree. There are going to be days when we wonder what the hell we were thinking, but I know this. We're stronger together than we were apart, and that's worth fighting for. Damn right it is, Marcus called out, raising his beer. Everyone drank to that. Later, after the crew had gone home and the fire had burned down to coals, Cole and Evelyn sat on the porch of what used to be just her house and was now their shared headquarters. You think we can really do this? Evelyn asked. Which part? The ranch or the partnership? Both. Either. I don't know. Cole looked out at the land stretching away into darkness. 300 acres that had been hers. 3,000 that had been his. Now all part of something larger than either piece alone. I think we have to try, he said, because the alternative is going back to how things were, and I don't think either of us can do that anymore. No, I don't think we can. So we move forward. We make mistakes. We fix them. We build something that neither of us could have built alone. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. You know what the weird part is? What? A few months ago, I would have rather died than accept this much help. Would have seen it as failure, as proof that I couldn't hack it. But now, she trailed off. Now? Now I think maybe I had it backwards. Maybe the real strength isn't doing everything yourself. Maybe it's knowing when to let someone else carry part of the weight. That's very wise. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not. You've always been smart. You're just finally applying that intelligence to yourself instead of just the ranch. She smiled. You've got an answer for everything, don't you? Not everything, but I'm working on it. Spring came slowly that year, winter reluctant to release its grip, but eventually the snow melted, the ground thawed, and the work of a new season began. They moved the cattle to fresh pasture, repaired what winter had broken, and started implementing the changes they'd planned. Some things went smoothly. The combined herd was healthier than either had been separately. The shared equipment meant better efficiency. The larger operation attracted better prices from buyers. Other things were disasters. They fought about whether to invest in new breeding stock. They argued about hiring decisions. They had one spectacular blowout about irrigation systems that ended with both of them not speaking for 3 days. This is normal, Marcus told Cole during the silent treatment. Every partnership goes through growing pains. How do you know? Because I've watched you fight with yourself for years. At least now you're fighting with someone who can fight back. On the 4th day, Evelyn showed up at Cole's door. I still think you're wrong about the irrigation, she said, and I still think you're being stubborn. Probably, but I've been thinking about what you said, and maybe we could compromise. Do a pilot program, test it on one section before committing to the whole property. Cole blinked. That's actually a good idea. Don't sound so shocked. I'm not. I'm just... We fought for 3 days and you came up with a solution that works for both of us. That's progress. Don't let it go to your head. I'm still mad at you. Noted. But she was smiling when she said it. By summer, the ranch was operating at a level neither property had achieved alone. The combined income was up 40%. They'd hired 2 full-time hands and 3 seasonal workers. The repairs were complete, the herd was thriving, and for the first time in years, both Cole and Evelyn could breathe without worrying about whether they'd make it through the next crisis. We did it, Evelyn said one evening, watching the sunset from the porch. Did what? Survived. Built something. Proved everyone wrong who said this wouldn't work. We're not done yet. No, but we're farther along than I thought we'd be. Cole sat beside her, comfortable in the silence. They'd developed a rhythm over the months, knowing when to push and when to back off, when to talk, and when to just be quiet together. You ever think about what would have happened if Dutch Morrison hadn't made that call? Evelyn asked. Sometimes. You'd probably be dead, and I'd still be running my ranch alone, wondering why it felt so empty. That's dark, but true. The accident almost killed you, but in a weird way, it also saved both of us, forced us to stop pretending we could do everything alone. Evelyn nodded slowly. I spent so many years thinking independence meant isolation, that asking for help was weakness, that if I couldn't do it alone, it didn't count. And now I know I was an idiot. The ranch is better because we're running it together. I'm better because I don't have to carry everything myself. Turns out strength isn't about how much you can lift alone. It's about knowing who to stand beside when the weight gets too heavy. When did you get so philosophical? When I almost died and had to rethink my entire approach to life. Tends to clarify things. Cole laughed. Yeah, I guess it does. They sat there as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The cattle grazed in the distance. The dogs dozed on the porch. Somewhere, Marcus was probably double-checking something that didn't need checking, because that's what Marcus did. It wasn't perfect. The ranch still had problems, the partnership still had rough spots, and they both still had habits of stubbornness that clashed more often than not. But it was working. Against all odds, despite all the reasons it shouldn't, it was actually working. You know what the best part is? Evelyn said. What? I don't have to prove anything anymore. Not to my father, not to everyone who said I'd fail, not even to myself. The ranch stands on its own merit, and that's enough. That's growth. That's survival. I just got smarter about how I do it. Cole thought about his own journey, the guilt over Daniel, the desperate need to save someone, the realization that he'd been trying to fix the past by controlling the present. He'd learned something too, though it had taken nearly dying in a blizzard to figure it out. I think we both learned the same lesson, he said, just from different directions. What's that? That strength isn't isolation, that accepting help isn't failure, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you can't do it alone and find someone who'll stand beside you anyway. Evelyn reached over and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, comfortable and easy in a way that would have been impossible 6 months ago. We make a good team, she said. Yeah, we do. The ranch thrived over the next year. They expanded the herd, upgraded the equipment, and built a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from 3 states away. The combined operation that had started as a desperate gamble became a model that other struggling ranchers started to study. People asked them how they made it work. 2 strong-willed people, 2 failing ranches, 1 partnership that defied all the odds. Cole and Evelyn had different answers depending on the day, but the core truth was always the same. They'd both been willing to change, to adapt, to let go of the stories they'd been telling themselves about what strength looked like. On the anniversary of the day Cole had found Evelyn half dead on her floor, they rode out to the south pasture together. Evelyn's leg had healed well enough that she could ride again, though she'd always walk with a slight limp. The scar was permanent, a reminder of how close she'd come to losing everything. You ever regret it? Cole asked. The partnership, the changes, all of it? Evelyn looked out at the cattle grazing peacefully, at the land that had been her prison and her purpose, now transformed into something bigger than either of them could have managed alone. Not for a second, she said. You? No. Best stupid decision I ever made. Riding into a blizzard for a stranger? That too. But I was talking about the partnership. She smiled. Yeah, me too. They rode back to this house as the sun set. Two people who'd learned the hard way that survival wasn't about how much you could endure alone, but about having the courage to share the burden with someone who understood the weight. The ranch they'd built together was stronger than either property had been separately, but more than that, they were stronger. Not despite their need for each other, but because of it. The winter that had nearly killed them both had in the end rebuilt their lives into something better than either had imagined. Not perfect. Nothing ever was, but real and solid and worth every fight it took to maintain. As they unsaddled the horses and fed the dogs and settled in for another evening of reviewing accounts and planning the next season, Evelyn paused. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing up. For not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. For believing we could build something better together." Cole met her eyes. "You would have done the same for me." "Maybe, but you did it first. That counts for something." It did count. It counted for everything. The ranch they'd built stood as proof that the strongest foundations weren't built on independence or isolation, but on the willingness to stand beside someone else when the storm came. They'd both learned that lesson the hard way, through pain and fear and a winter that had tested every assumption they'd held about what they could survive alone. But they had survived. More than that, they'd thrived. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.